We are so glad you joined us today to get centered. But we have a disclaimer. Being centered really is more of an aspiration than a destination. This is a vodcast where we'll be discussing all things mind and body, mental health, physical well-being, parenting, marriage, healthy touch, anger and how to handle it. What is integrative medicine? How do I meditate? What are we learning from COVID in this quarantine experience? Where do we go from here? You have questions on these topics, and we ask those same questions ourselves. So this isn't a vodcast full of answers. It's one full of discussion, because we're going to tell you right now we do not have all the answers, but we do love a rich discussion and hope you do too. We're Leela Scott and John Price, the founders of the Center for Healing Arts and Sciences, and this vodcast is hosted by our amazing team, which is comprised of an integrative group of therapists offering individual, couples, family, depth therapy, and offers support groups for men, women, teens, young professionals, and others. Chinese medicine practitioners offering acupuncture, herbal medicine, food therapy, lifestyle advice, and last but not least, our mindfulness meditation and spirituality guide. Be sure to reach out to us to let us know other topics you'd like to hear us discuss, or to let us know if you'd like to work with our integrative team. We are here for you and offering virtual care as well as home delivery of wellness self-care packages during this time of physical separation. Give us a shout at 713-526-4444 and be sure to follow us on social at Center for HAS. And now, please enjoy the show.
Well, hey folks, welcome back to Get Centered, where the clinicians and practitioners at the Center for the Healing Arts and Sciences get together and talk about topics that we find interesting. Hopefully you do too. So today's topic is work, and we're going to hopefully amplify that subject in ways that aren't typical, but we'll hear from everybody, and we'll just be free associating. So welcome to you guys.
Yeah.
When you think about work, what first comes to mind? Now let's look at it from the perspective of the people that come into our offices. So I'm assuming that it's one of the, if we were to list the top 5 topics that people come in where they're having stress or issues, work is one of those 5, correct? Is that how you guys feel? Yeah. So a couple of questions, like, how do people frame work? How do you guys frame work from a theoretical perspective? And how do you work through the issue of work? And why do I keep saying the word work when I'm talking about psychological work? So let's hang that too. So what do y'all think? What do people bring in?
Well, you just said psychological work. And so are we going to be talking about all kinds of work?
I think so. I think we should go wherever I think it's interesting to me that we use the word work about psychological work. We say it in relationships. I guarantee you, if we watch a previous episode, we talk about doing the work in relationship. We talk about what is your work, right? I mean, in small talk, how many times you say, what do you do? So this framework is used in all kinds of different contexts. And I think that's important to keep in mind as we talk about what work is and what it represents for a pretty industrious culture that we're in, certainly in the US, but really in the kind of world as we're evolving with technologies and how somebody works.
Yeah, you're right, John. And I think it's like work as identity. I think you hit the nail on the head when most people greet somebody new for the first time. The stock question is, what do you do? And that what do you do often translates to who you are. And I think the gulf between who you really are and who you identify it as through your work presents a lot of problems.
But I think when people say, what do you do? It's even narrower than that and relates to our topic that you led last week. People mean, how do you make money? Mm-hmm. It is even a narrower version of identity.
Yeah, I know. Like, I try to be conscious of that too and choose, what are you into when I'm meeting somebody? I really try to avoid that question because it does seem to monetize the person somehow, But I'd say that the way it shows up in my practice is often that people are overworked, or they're so identified with self-worth through work that it's hard to conceive of or allow themselves to rest and restore. So there becomes this sort of all yang, all go, all action, all the time. And again, with that sense of worth, there's something around taking a pause and not producing, that suddenly we don't feel like we're allowed to take up the space that we take up. We have to earn our keep to just exist on planet Earth, you know? But what I find so interesting is, you know, like you said, working on relationships, there's other ways to consider work, but the things that we do for self-care, we conceive of them as taking a break or being inert or unproductive, when in fact those things are very much work, and they are working, and they are working in and of themselves, but they're also working to help you continue to produce, you know, because it's not to take away the value of the importance of work and what we get out of our vocations and our productivity, but we've become so hyper focused on productivity that we really can have a difficult time just being. John will remember whenever I started to take one day off a week a while ago. I don't do it really anymore, but I was like, I'm going to write a book that's called Tuesday's a Bitch, because all I did on Tuesdays was feel depressed and miserable. And upon first, you know, experiencing that, you could think, oh, I guess it's bad to take a break. You know, it feels awful. But really what it was doing was creating a space for stuff that I didn't have to notice with all of my busyness to come up, you know? And so I eventually got used to Tuesdays and added Thursdays. And it's a really interesting thing to trudge through, because you want to walk right back in the direction of work once you're taking a break. When you feel that, I did.
Yeah,
I,
well, that depends on how you're using work, right? So it depends. Some of us, I mean, I'll speak for myself. I like to be busy. Like I
Mm-hmm.
like to have my plate pretty full. So because well, there's for a few reasons. One, and this is part of the investigation of your intentionality and like why we're doing things. But for me, it's because I've got a lot of energy. I'm an energetic person. I've got that. Um, and so I need to do a lot of things in order to feel like I'm really doing what I'm supposed to be doing on Earth in some way. And then, but sometimes though, it's exactly what you're describing, where I'm working to avoid that feeling of helplessness. And when that's happening, then I'm like, because the truth is, we really don't control everything. That's what, if we're working in order to bury that, that becomes a problem. I think in my practice, I've also see people who either their work doesn't provide them any real meaning, like they do it and it's transactional, and they just don't feel like that they're spending, 40 to 60 hours a week doing this thing that pays the bills, maybe even pays the bills very well, but it doesn't really, it's not filling them up, some in a spiritual way, in some way. But I've also encountered people who their work, not the work itself, but maybe the people they are surrounded with while they're working, sometimes they're toxic. Sometimes those people or their boss are like, they're bad people. They're doing bad things. Or maybe they're not bad people, but they're doing bad things over and over, and they're asking their workers to do bad things too. And so that I find is one of those difficult areas where you have to start figuring out, okay, how do I shift? Because if it's actually bad, it's different than just transactional, right? I think there's no shame in just doing a job that doesn't like excite you, right? We all need to live to eat and to work and whatever, but at a certain point, you don't want to be contributing to something that's negative, and that's where the real issues come up, and that's not going to resolve unless you resolve that aspect of your life, right? If you're having anxiety because you're doing bad things, you need to stop doing bad things, right? That's part of the work. I don't know. That's kind of the pieces on productivity internally. Where's the end? Where's the end? It's not that you have to always do something meaningful, but to do something that's causing harm, that's another issue.
Like on the flip side of that, it's kind of like, Ariel, you kind of pinpointed like one of my clients right now, that's actually going through that. She works in the medical field, so there's been a lot of kind of back and forth of how to do things. And I don't know, I feel like a lot of people have just kind of, the things that have popped up is just like having to watch what they say, how they say it, when they say it, which brings on, more and more stress and not knowing how to kind of work through those dynamics. And kind of going off of, even what Leela, you said, was the fact of like the self-care, but also the self-compassion moment. Like so many times, all the women that I've already are working with and are currently working with, they don't take 5 minutes for themselves because they always are trying to kind of catch up to the next thing. What's the next thing that's going to come up? Or even kind of predetermining the negative situations that haven't happened yet, and already kind of are stewing in their own anxieties about like, okay, something's bad's going to happen, even though in reality, nothing has actually happened yet. So kind of staying very present and in the moment, I think, is a big part of the work.
Yeah, I mean, combining what you both have just said, it's like this, we've talked about cognitive dissonance before, but it's like if what the way you perceive the person that you are is not lining up with what you're doing for your living or for your work, if there's going to be, almost like a soul issue. And interestingly, since you brought up the medical field, I just heard an interesting statistic that said the medical profession, within the medical profession, suicides are up something like 400% because of some of the things they're being asked to do compared to what they know to be their own truths.
Well, yeah, because it becomes transactional in that space. Not to go too far down that rabbit hole, but I kind of want to, sorry, that's another piece of like what you perceived your profession was going to be before you got in, and the reason you got into your profession, and then what it actually ended up being is also a big part of that. So there's so many doctors who they just want to help people, right? They get into that field because they just want to treat people and help people. And then because of the way that the medical system is kind of set up now, they have to be transactional. They have to try to push a procedure on you. They have to, like if you're a surgeon, if you're not doing surgery, you're not getting paid, right? So you have to recommend surgery all the time, even if somebody's kind of not necessarily, and they have quotas, right? In certain systems, they have a quota. They have to hit a certain amount of surgeries in order to get paid. That's an interesting element. So I've talked to people who they find themselves in the profession they really wanted to just help, and now they find that what they're being asked to do is hurt. They're being asked to operate on people who don't need it, which is that's a huge issue when you sort of come up against what your actual profession is, and can you do that with integrity? That's another aspect of it. I'm thinking about that Sabbath question John asked in the beginning as it's interesting because it kind of brings all of this stuff together. It's actually active in terms of what Leila Scott was framing earlier. You would think that rest is just static, like you do nothing. But actually, the way that our society is, or maybe our culture, or as a human beings, maybe, I don't know, it actually takes an active stance to do the rest of the Sabbath. It's the same thing in terms of the meditations, that when we meditate, it's like you have to actively decide to meditate. You have to do something. You have to actually, it's the funny title of the book is Don't Just Do Something, Sit There. Mm-hmm. But you actually have to make that an actual practice in your life in order for you then to be able to it's kind of not obvious. It seems like, oh, if I stop working, then I'm going to be less productive. But what actually happens if you test it and see what it does to your system is you stop doing, and that ceasing actually energizes you and focuses you and brings you more energy for whatever it is you're going to do after. So it's like in your moment when you feel like I'm too stressed to rest, or like there's too much going on to stop right now, maybe in certain, it's like life or death kind of situations, that might be true, like keep running. But by and large, most of our problems don't stop in the span of an hour or two. They go on for a long time. And if you're going to have a problem for a long time, you need to rest, or you need to have those Sabbath times. So I found that, especially when I just started my Sabbath practice, it was hard. It was really hard. It was, I mean, it took a lot more energy to get the Sabbath practice established. And then once it's been established, now it's like, thank God it's coming, right? Thank God it's here. And I soak it up. Every minute of it is like, I'm not trying to rush out of that space because it's already something that it took some energy to install in terms of the self care aspect of that. And then it actually starts to bring and generate energy to the point where I feel like I have an overflow of energy outside of those spaces because I've kind of pulled back. It allows me to regroup in some way. It's like part of how I think it's part of how we work as humans. It's odd. You just have to stop doing in order to re-energize. It's kind of an odd thing.
Yeah. If I can overlay the elemental system, the phases, right? We have fire in our bodies. We have it in nature. We have it in our bodies, and that's good. We need heat. We need fire. But an uncontained fire demolishes everything, right? There's nothing left. The kidneys and the heart have a relationship there. The heart pertaining to fire, the kidneys pertaining to water. And the water in our bodies is what helps to control that fire. And we hear a lot of people talking about adrenal fatigue and stuff like that. And that is just another way of saying they're burning out all the trees in their own forest, you know? So all this rest stuff that we do have to install, and that does take work to install, is actually helping you perpetuate the ability to be productive in ways that you do want to be when you're not resting. But to go even just a little bit further, like sleep, there's even almost like this idea of sleep as being extra, you know, but the amount of memory consolidating and organ detoxifying that happens when you just let yourself sleep enough, that's not a luxury, you know?
Yeah, I think of it in terms of like as an escalating kind of like at the bottom level or top, I don't know, top or bottom, whatever. There's sort of like there's one level which is the basic like daily regular check-ins times for actually just that's what I think of my meditation practice as these kind of rest times. Even though it's active, right? Even though I have an object of my meditation and it is some kind of work, it's different than the other stuff I do. And then there's the sleep, right, which has to happen every day. And like you said, when you try to shortcut that, I mean, I think that in America we have we have a problem with sleep more than like probably a lot of other things. If we got our sleep in order, I remember I went to my doctor. We talked about this before. I went to my doctor and my son was 4 months old, and we did this thing where we like get up every single time he kind of peeps in the middle of the night, and he said to me all of the things you're describing to me, everything you've described in terms of your memory loss and you're feeling a little crazy and a little polar and whatever. He says everything you described to me could be resolved with sleep. Mm-hmm. Everything. I'm prescribing you sleep. And when I started to get the sleep back, then everything kind of, it's not like I have no problems, right? But everything is better when I have my sleep. And then I think that it's important. I think the Jewish tradition says this, and many other traditions say this, to take one day a week, like just a day, where it's you don't do the normal things you do. Actually go out for the walk in the park and go see some green and take a nap and watch a movie, or I don't know, whatever, something that fills you up, that actually, or read a book. Right, do something that restores your soul, that's not just running the rat race.
It's interesting with this group talking about this idea of ceasing, since I've done some research into beards and done a lot of interviews on beards. And the irony is that a beard happens when you stop doing something. Mm-hmm. We don't have a beard because, for men generally, because you shave, you take it away, you intentionally do something. And when you stop doing that and allow whatever is happening naturally to emerge, that's when it happens. And we think of this sort of masculine principle as being so active and proactive and doing something. But ironically, in this case, and I think it could be applied to a lot of things with the unconscious, a lot of productivity, a lot of creativity, it's really a matter of stopping and letting whatever is there emerge.
Mm-hmm. So I really like this conversation, but as as I'm listening to it, I'm hearing so many different levels, right? I mean, I'm thinking about what is the nature of human beings. You know, like we are very curious. We of course create tools and technology, and so we engage our environment. There's something mysterious about the environment, and we try to make sense of it. We try to understand what's going on, and then we create these systems to try to operate in that environment. And if we're living in small communities, we're tending to our garden and we're getting our food and we're doing our communal processes and we're interacting with our neighbors. And so we create systems that are, you know, religious or political or economic in that particular environment. And as we grow and grow and grow, that becomes more and more difficult. So the systems systematize even further. And then all of a sudden work isn't so much about what I need to do to tend to my own area. It's what I need to do to make money because they're doing something on a bigger scale. And now I need to do what they're doing. And so what I'm thinking about in the people that I've worked with is how often I work with people who are like, oh my God, I don't have a purpose. And they're totally anxious about this, not having a purpose. And so we've done this thing where we make everybody really anxious about not feeling like the angels are singing whenever I find my work. And if I don't have that, then I'm really struggling because I'm just, you know, pushing a broom or something. And it's really imperialistic and kind of narcissistic to think that, you know, it's only people with purpose that, you know, quote, with purpose, who are actualized or something. So work has different dimensions, you know. Ariel, I think you were saying it earlier, you know, like, yeah, we need to like make money, right? Or we need to, you know, do something around the home. You know, I consider like we have chickens in our house and that takes work. You know, we build stuff and feed them and, you know, do all kinds of things to, you know, live with them, but also to get what they produce, right? These eggs, like I get benefit from that. So there's like a mythic framework that exists with work, you know, like we human beings seek out some kind of framework. And if it doesn't match what's in here, then I may suffer. Or if I can just say, yeah, I do that because I'd get paid, great. But what I'm thinking about though is all the anxiety that comes about regarding what my work is or how I'm working or how I'm not working or how I'm, you know, measuring up in the world. That turns into, I mean, real world symptoms, right? Where people really suffer. So when you're working with people on the issue of work, how do you frame it for them?
Well,
I
for
think
me,
that
it's
speaks a lot to, well, I want Eddie to continue because when he said identity, I think that's what we're talking about. I mean, to me, it's helpful to visualize sort of a Venn diagram, you know, and if a person's Venn diagram of who they are and what they do or what their job is identical, there's a problem. You know, what am I apart from that? What has been developed that isn't directly related to that? And sorry, go ahead, Eddie.
Well, I was going to say, Ariel touched on it, and it's meaning. There's a threshold for receiving money, and above that threshold, you just don't want to do the work. Like, it's not worth the money. But you can endure much more when there's meaning. But we've conflated meaning and our work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very noble attribute of young people and this new generation that they want to do meaningful work. But it's very difficult to find work that's actually meaningful to in the way that your soul seeks meaning. And so when you're looking for meaning in just your work, it sets you up for failure. And not saying that you can't find meaningful jobs, you can, but I would say it's few and far between. And so you have to be able to sometimes divorce meaning from your work, and your job can just be the thing that makes you money, that helps you finance the meaningful work in some other thing, doing charity, doing whatever,
right,
outside of the work context. And so I think I've found that just letting people know that, hey, you know, your job can just be your job, and that's okay. but you do need to have meaningful work somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
That may not be your job. Hopefully it is, but it might not be.
It reminds me of relationships and how we tend to do that in marriages and partnerships. We want that partner to just fulfill everything for us, friendship, romance, whatever, finances, etc. And we have to eventually learn, no, this person can't be everything to me, right? You have to fill your own basket somehow, be your own whole self. And it sounds very similar to what you're saying about work.
Well, what do you think about, I think about in the US, but I don't think it's just the US. I think it's as populations expand, as technologies are introduced, I think a natural human conclusion is that we're going to do things that are, quote, Westernized. But what we've done here is we've made the corporation an equivalent to the human. And so, corporations have rights that are human. They are treated as a human by the law. And so that I think it underscores some of what we're talking about, some of the implications of looking at how work is becoming synonymous with the kind of living body. And we suffer probably deeply as a result of being disconnected from, because I think what happens is that we have our own imagination. This is what I would like to do. This is what I would like to, how I'd like to spend my time, how I'd like the values that I want to live out. But then I have to work. And so then I have to go do what they tell me I need to do during my day. And so I have to do that. I have to subordinate myself at times to a higher power and kind of walk the walk or learn the whatever. Maybe it's in service to finding something in myself. Maybe it's in service to just paying the bills. But eventually, if it's inside of me, I may find that I want to find greater purpose and meaning. And so I leave that. I mean, that it's just kind of how we operate. But here in the US, corporation is king. What do y'all think about that?
So uncontained wildfires continue to burn, and we're a people out of balance. We see the waves retreat into the ocean and we don't think, oh, what a lazy ocean. It's retreating back before the next wave crashes. But when we embody and practice behaviors that allow us to retreat to then go back and work some more, it's not as accepted. It almost needs to be a movement, I think. I do a lot of patient education, I would say, in that regard.
Yeah, well, and the word corporation comes from corporeal, which is body. It's just a collection of people. The villainizing of the quote unquote corporation, I think, is a scapegoat. And it's kind of lazy because it's just a collection of people. And that collection of people is just a reflection of a societal value. The idea of a corporation is there's only really one idea, it's increase shareholder value. That is the be all end all for a corporation. But that is a man-made construct. We can change that construct. If you analogize a corporation to a person, they have the same sort of collective memory. They have the same sort of, in Jungian terms, collective unconscious, a personal unconscious, a cultural unconscious. And when you when the leadership of a corporation starts to do the work of uncovering those unconscious factors and realize they are more than just increasing shareholder value, culture can change, and those corporations can start to do better. And so I think it's important to remember that those soulless corporations are just made up of people, and in that way we can start to do some quote unquote work to bring change about.
Thinking about the like person who's in the corporation and they're going there to pay the bills, and they're kind of feeling that sense of like being trapped in the position that they're in, and the fact that they have to earn a living, that they go to a place that tells them what to do and they don't really have autonomy. And I'm thinking about this. There's a concept that I don't remember which book I read it in, but I definitely, like, pretty much none of my ideas are my own. Just so you should know that. I find stuff and then it comes back out of me.
Amen.
So it's like it's basically the concept that got stuck in my head was yes, you do have a choice. Yes, you do. Right? You choose that it's better for you to get up out of your bed and instead of staying home and doing whatever it is you feel like doing, you choose to go to work in the morning in those situations, right? You do choose to go to work. You may not like that that's your realm of choices, but and that if you chose not to go to work, you might get fired. That would be right. But it's a choice. So it's like I think for me, it's bringing back the like in terms of what I do with people I'm working with. It's bringing back the element of choice. It's reminding people that actually, yes, you do have a choice, and you have chosen, and you continue to choose to keep doing what you're doing. So, like, just the concept that you feel like you're not trapped. You always have a choice. You can do or you cannot do, and you keep doing. So let's what are the pluses and minuses of that? There's another piece of that which is I think actually more on the spiritual side of things that we're coming up on the Jewish high holidays, and one of the prayers that we do on the beginning night of Rosh Hashanah. And Leila Scott, I know you wanted to know how to greet a Jew in this time period. It's you say Shana Tova. It means Shana means year, Tova means good. So you say when you have a good year, Shana Tova. So one of the prayers that we say, it's emblematic of the day, is it's like this whole list of how all the ways you could die. It's like who's gonna die this year and in what way? And it's like who's gonna die by fire and who's gonna die by water, right back to the fire and water thing. By water, and who's by stoning and who by drowning and who by whatever, right? And when I look at that prayer, I think to myself, what it's really saying is wake up. Like what that prayer is really saying, I don't think there's a divinity out there that's like kind of waving a magic wand saying, go, you were going to die because you were good or you were bad and you're whatever. Like that, I think that's just, it's childish. And I think that at a certain point, you have to also recognize, I don't know. Like none of us know how this year is going to go. And none of us know if we're going to last another year. And none of us know if we're going to last another day or even the rest of this hour. So it's like bringing back the consciousness of, let me not waste my time. And that doesn't mean that, oh, I have to like walk away from my responsibilities. It's just to say, if I'm going to spend 8 hours a day in a place every day, 5 days a week, let's not let that be just something I'm passing time doing, because it may be that's all I get, right? I may not make it through that day. So how do I bring myself to be awake and alive through the day, not just trying to pass the time? And I get sometimes you got to numb yourself to get through things, but that can't be your lifestyle. Like it can't be how you do every day, every year. Otherwise you start to like basically petrify. You kind of, I think that's what happens. That's when people come to us a few years deep into living like that, and they're like, I don't know, I feel numb. I'm like, I'm just drowning myself in alcohol and pills or whatever to get through it, and my whole life is falling apart and I feel like there's no meaning. It's because they like kind of drown out life. And you can't just turn off one aspect of life. All of it turns off if you turn the hose down, right? Like it just turns all of the joy and the negative all at once. So we have to learn how to also be with what this comes back to the beginning of the conversation of, you got to learn how to be with the discomfort and the positive, because it can't be that your whole day is misery, right? Even just being alive and noticing now like that I'm breathing, that's pleasant. It's nice, right? It's nice to be able to breathe. And you can do that all day, Just thinking about that aspect of choice.
Well, and I think about analysis too. Like when somebody brings in an issue with work, what they're asking is to be more reflective and to have help in understanding what's actually living through them. You know, like when you were talking, Eddie, I was thinking about the term believe, you know, being defined as what you follow. And so there is a part of like, what are you living out? And are you conscious of it? You know, I work with people all the time who are not conscious of the fact that they're living out some program that was given to them about what it means to be a man or a woman or a human or a worker or a not. You know, like how many people have I worked with that are physicians who don't want to be a physician really, but they are a physician because it's how you make money and it's how you be of service and it's how you whatever, and they want to like dance or something, you know, like they're I think that our discomfort, our symptoms within the dimension of work, if our approach is, I want to get rid of that symptom, then we're missing the opportunity to understand from a deeper part of ourselves a little clue or a hint of where we are on a, you know, here's a buzzword, on an authentic path, something's genuinely true for us, and where we're just playing out some kind of old tape that has been played for us thousands of times before by caregivers and that have said, this is what you have to do, this is what you have to do, and have subtly affected how we make decisions. So I think there is a religious framework here, which is like, what are you living out? What are you following? Who is your God? And if you're not able to answer that question, then maybe reflecting on, even to use the past discussions we've had, money, relationships, if you have children, right, how you parent, and work. And that those are going to be parts of what come up in therapy that aren't like, I want to do this or do that, help me decide. That's not what therapy's about, right? It's why are you in a conflict in the first place? And where does that conflict come from? And tell me what kind of narratives you've taken in throughout your life to be in that conflict in the first place. You know, the fact that you feel uncomfortable is an indicator that something's happening in your unconscious. Hey, Scott, you were going to say something, I think.
I've had like 5 different thoughts while you were talking and I've lost them all, but I wanted to just reference, I'm reading a book right now that is talking about some of this stuff. And I found it interesting that she lets us know that passive and passion come from the same root word, pati, which means to endure. I thought that was worth mentioning.
Yeah, even work that you really love sometimes has rough stuff, you know.
Yeah, what we do, the Emyth, we were reading that book, the Emyth, and it's got a story in it about a woman who likes to bake pies, and she just loves pies. Pies are like her life. And so she does the logical thing in our world, our production model, which is she creates a pie restaurant. And then she starts to hate making pies because she's got to be up at 4 a.m. and dealing with finances and all that. So pies are lost to her. I mean, how many artists do that where they're like, oh my God, I just want to, you know, I actually had a crazy insight when I was on tour. I was in a band before and I was driving up the Pacific Coast Highway in California and going, is this it? Like, I mean, it was a lifelong dream and it's like, you know, great. Okay. I'm out every night and I don't even know what day it is or where we are. And somebody's telling me what show I have to play next. And like, this is not what I envisioned when I was, you know, from 6 years old to 24 years old. You know? It is interesting. And that's the piece. It reflects a fantasy. Like what, and I mean that word in a very important way, the fantasy or our imagination. What are you imagining? And that's the important piece. Like if you imagine you were going to be a stockbroker and then you're in a conflict because it's not quite what you thought it was going to be, let's go back to what you imagined it was going to be. And I think that's more fruitful than saying, you know, I shouldn't do this or I should do that. I mean, that piece was, there was eros that was connected to the work that's more reflective of something deeper inside of yourself. We got to be shutting down in a little bit. We're coming up on time. Gia, you got anything?
Oh, Rodney, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I think there's also a development piece in here in that, you know, the relationship that's established with one's career, whatever, no matter how good, no matter how fruitful, is going to change. And someone in their 40s, I think, shouldn't have the same relationship with what they do and those sorts of identity things as they did in their 20s, even if they have the same career their entire life. So I think we're also talking about a constant reevaluation and a constant, again, search for meaning, and how even though we may do the same things, we may have different motivations, different attitudes, and different understandings at different points of our life.
Yeah, I think the one big thing that kept popping up between kind of John and Ariel was kind of meaningful play within ourselves, and tapping into that creative component, and kind of, John, what you were saying, going back to the drawing board, if this isn't what I envisioned. I think that, so many people tend to be like, okay, I want to be a stockbroker, I want to be a doctor, I want to be whatever else, and it doesn't live up to that expectation. And then, the follow-up question is, and then what? And then where do you go from there? So I definitely think that incorporating the play, because it's just like, when can you sit down and really tap into that creativity? I know our team does, with everyone's little quirks and everything else in between. But yeah, no, a lot of people that I've talked with, both in the practice and outside of the practice, it's just like, 8 hours of work later, and they're just still sitting on their couch and kind of figuring out, okay, what do I do next? And it's just kind of like, go take care of yourself. Go do whatever you want, however you want, and create that space, right? Go get a cup of coffee, go take a bath. I don't know, go paint a wall or something, just to kind of reorient your mind, instead of that repetitive, consistent, okay, I need to make sure that I scheduled everything right, or these spreadsheets need to be like 100% accurate, or whatever. Like, at the end of the day, the work's gonna still be there, but the play might not be, if you don't kind of tap into that. So cool.
Well, folks, it's good chatting it up with you. Thanks for hanging out at Get Centered, and thank you all for suiting up and showing up today, and talking about this that we're all affected by. We the word, Gio, when you were talking, is orientation. Work certainly provides the human tendency to be creative, to meander, to imagine, and to fantasize. It orients us. And sometimes that can be a positive thing when it connects with what's going on in our heart. And sometimes that can be a dissociating thing, because we end up renouncing our own kind of desires and imagination in service to live something else out. And then we can suffer because of it as a result. It's good chatting with you all. And we will see you next time here on Get Centered. Thanks for showing up. Until then.